I am your host, Peter Norquest, and I am joined today by my co-host, Terra Radliff.
Hi, everyone.
And we're pleased to have with us our occasional guest, chairwoman of the state and Pima County Libertarian Party, Dru Heaton.
Aloha.
And we're giving a big shout out, as we always do, to our engineer and producer, Melly Ryan. And thanks, as always, to her for her help with getting the show out. Today, you guys, we're going to be wrapping up season 2, which has been a much longer and more involved piece of work than we ever anticipated.
You are not kidding.
So for the benefit of anyone who is either joining us for the first time or may have not heard us for a while, Season 2 was devoted to the Trump administration. We began pretty much after the inauguration, and we've spent a little bit more than the last year covering different parts of the Trump administration in all of our respective episodes. And there's been a lot that's happened. It's happened quickly.
Yeah.
And it's been difficult to keep up with, which is part of the reason why it's taken us as long as it has to get where we are right now. So we're excited to be wrapping this up today, having a roundtable discussion about all the ground that we've covered in the past year, as well as recent developments.
Yeah.
And then after this episode, we'll be moving on to season 3, and we will announce what that will entail when you hear us next. But for now, you guys, let's do some wrap up and some conversation about all of the terrain that we've covered collectively together and with our listening audience and with all of the people around us in the last year.
How does it feel to be right? Like practically a year in advance. Not fun, not good, no.
But I do have to say that's a good point, Dru. It's validating that we are doing something right, because we did a couple of presentations at the beginning of all of this where we made some predictions, and basically we have not been wrong as much as we wanted to be. And that's going to be something that we're going to be continuing. We're going to continue to forecast, try to look at what's going on right now and help you, the listening audience, anticipate what's coming down the pike so that you can prepare both psychologically as well as practically for the world that we're rapidly entering into, which is a world that libertarians disapprove of.
I think it's important to be able to see what is happening around us, as horrible as it may be. You have to be able to see it in order to deal with it and find a way to survive it. As ugly as it is sometimes to have to look at all this stuff, it's an important detail that you can't just live in a bubble. I'm sorry, as hard as that is, there are days when I want to live in a bubble, but it's not practical in order to survive with your freedoms intact.
Right. No, it's not. But one of the best things that can help us get through the times that we're in psychologically is knowing that we're not alone.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons we do this podcast, because we want people who are like-minded to be able to tune in and listen to people talking about reality, not some sort of a fantasy world that we're being indoctrinated into, constantly trying to basically pacify us so that we don't push back against what is happening, and ultimately we lose the core ways that we might be able to help ourselves navigate.
As human beings, I think that's ultimately why we would push back, right? Why don't we go along with these things? Because the agenda for us and others out there is to remain free, sovereign, voluntarious human beings, to live that libertarian lifestyle.
Yeah, no, it is. And this being a libertarian show, it's perfect in a lot of ways for the discussion we're having, because what we're seeing in the big picture is ultimate centralization of government, centralization of the private sphere going hand in hand with that, and centralization of control, which is antithetical to the libertarian message, where we promote individual freedom. And so we are the best critics of everything that is coming down the pike right now.
Maybe that's why we're having so many problems, because we're speaking truth and they don't want it to get out.
Yeah, and we're in good company for now. I am always happy to see that there are plenty of people who are speaking out against this as well out there.
Yes.
We know a few of them in person. There's a lot of people out on the internet. I dread the day that all of those voices get silenced one way or another. And so I'm very much enjoying the fact that there are plenty of people who are speaking out despite the censorship that's happening largely in a soft form right now.
I wish there were more.
Yes. Well, that's what we're here to try to cultivate.
Yes. Agreed.
You guys, let's go ahead and get down to business here. And we've got a lot to review and catch up on. Where shall we get started?
Well, I think one of the points when you were opening, Peter, that I thought of was we had no idea we were going here for season 2. We just did a presentation on the Trump administration and what we saw happening, and it just snowballed from there.
Right.
We put our original season 2 on hold to cover what we did in season 2, the new season 2.
Yeah, well, I remember that. We intended it to be a few weeks, a few episodes, and it ended up providing enough material to go throughout the entire season with a little bit of spillover.
Yes. Well, we each individually, the 3 of us, were very busy with different things. And so fortunately, we had some stuff we could put out there in between our Trump administration shows. So that was good.
Yeah.
But now we're here.
Yeah, I see that one of the things we might want to start off with is the Dark Enlightenment.
That's a great place to start.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that deserves some conversation because we've mentioned it a couple of times in our previous episodes, but it's a driving philosophy behind what's going on, especially at the national level in the United States federal government, but also at a more global level as well. Yeah. And so for the benefit of anyone who's never heard of this, the Dark Enlightenment is basically a philosophy that has been touted by a couple of people for the last few decades. The first person was a Brit named Nick Lands, and the second one is a guy named Curtis Yarvin, who's an American Silicon Valley figure, a blogger who for years went by the name Mencius Moldbug online. Now he just goes by his actual name, Curtis Yarvin. But between the two of them, they've crafted this philosophy called the Dark Enlightenment, which is basically an argument that governments, in the true spirit of fascism, should be run as corporations. So for students of history, you're familiar that fascism basically is some combination of the state with the private sector. In World War II, fascist Italy was the foremost example of what people still think of as textbook fascism, where the government took control of private industry. Nazi Germany was an example of this, as was Japan in that era also. And it's been turned on its head a little bit, where the private sector right now is actually taking control of the government rather than the other way around. But the idea is that government should be run as a corporation, and it should have an executive, a CEO, which would be the president, but the president should have the powers of a CEO. And then he should work with a board of experts, which is also something prescribed by Technocracy, which we'll review in a little bit. And this Dark Enlightenment basically argues that the traditional values of the original Enlightenment, liberty, fraternity, equality, are restrictive factors that are impeding real progress, and that they need to be jettisoned in favor of something that is overtly autocratic.
Absolutely. More like a dictatorship.
Like a dictatorship, and one where democracy is done away with as an anachronism, and where citizens become shareholders and stakeholders in the government, but they do not participate in terms of being part of a voting electorate.
So basically, the Dark Enlightenment is a way to privatize government where the government is controlled by a CEO.
Yes.
And we're just the little peons, the little minimum wage workers who don't have a choice or a vote or freedom or anything.
Yeah. And in that way, it's collectivist, which is another thing that is very contrary to libertarianism, where we promote the importance of individual freedom. And the Dark Enlightenment is a collectivist philosophy that basically says that everyone is an integral part to the ultimate well-being of the whole, of the group. And so if we are a peon, so be it. It's our place. It's the role that we have to play in this greater collective structure. And for anyone, if you remember Elon Musk getting out there on the campaign trail with his dark MAGA gear, that was actually an overt tip of the hat to this Dark Enlightenment philosophy. And it is also something that ended up being used extensively when a lot of people in the Trump administration were writing up what was called Project 2025.
So our point in bringing this up is that this is the overarching theme of where we are seeing the global system, our national system. And this is where it's going. It's slowly being taken over or bought by private companies. And there's a concentration there where they're condensing and bringing it all back into trying to get it all together with one CEO.
Right. Well, and we've been arguing that the Trump administration is being puppeteered by a couple of specific interests ever since they came into power. Something that's not exclusive to them, but which is much more obvious than has been true for previous administrations. And two of those interests, we've argued, have been Silicon Valley and then the State of Israel. And we've seen both of those played out in spades within the last year. And especially right now with the Iran invasion, we're seeing the fingerprint of Zionist Israel. But Silicon Valley has been the driver that has really enabled this push toward technocracy and toward this Dark Enlightenment blueprint that was never really possible in the past because they just didn't have the practical means of implementing it in a way that would be permanent.
And of course, now they do. And listeners, you are going to get an earful because that is coming down hard in the US. I'm going to explain why a little later. The technocrats and taking over with the technology.
And we have one example here listed of a technate that is being developed, a technate being this system of control that is basically based on technology and an appeal to scientific experts that is being rolled out in Ohio right now.
Yes. Yeah. And I'd never heard of this before.
Okay.
Whitney Webb wrote an article on Unlimited Hangout called Technate Ohio, and it's absolutely horrifying that this has been in the making since, I think she said, the 80s with Epstein and a couple of other players.
Les Wexner
Yes.
is a huge driver with this. So if anyone is not familiar with Leslie Wexner, he is someone who was coordinating very closely with Jeffrey Epstein during the time that Epstein was involved in all the different things that he was involved in. Wexner was also the one who moved Howard Lutnick into a house next to Jeffrey Epstein and basically paid for all the outfitting of the house, including all the spy gear inside. And he is the mob boss, if you will, for this technique that's being built out in Ohio, where Ohio is being used as a test bed to model technocracy as a system of governance. Yeah, because they're building all sorts of data center infrastructure in Ohio, the New Albany area, which is right outside of Columbus. And yeah, they're putting in a ton of smart city infrastructure. And it's important to understand this because there are a lot of people out there who are conservative leaning, who during the COVID era began to be indoctrinated into the assumption that blue states were worse than red states. So if you wanted to be free, it was important to either live in or move to a red state. And what we're seeing right now is that the red states are not any safer than the blues.
No, and that's partly because of the technocrats. And something, Peter, I want to stress with this Technate Ohio, specifically New Albany, it started out as a town of a couple hundred, now it's a few thousand. But the whole point of New Albany is that it is owned by and is run by a CEO. There is no government. The government is the CEO in the board of directors. And so I would encourage listeners, I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's a great read. And I'll actually post a link to the video she did to interview about it. But it's important to understand, because if you see things start to happen in your area, like something that Whitney Webb brought up was the way you can start seeing that data centers are going to start coming into your area is that corporations will come to farmers and want to purchase their farmland for a lot of money. Not necessarily data center owners, but another venture capitalist who's buying up land to sell to these data center companies. So if you start hearing in your area that farmers are being propositioned to buy their property, then that's a really good sign that data centers are upcoming in your area.
Exactly. And before we leave this, I just wanted to mention one other thing about New Albany, because Meta is starting to build out these gargantuan data centers as like trials in a few different parts of the country. And New Albany is going to host one of their data centers called Prometheus, which is going to be this huge 1 gigawatt center. And to put that into perspective, 1 gigawatt is enough to power hundreds of thousands of homes. So these data centers are going to be using as much energy as small countries. And we've got that plopping down right in the middle of Ohio.
Okay. A lot of the problems with people living around data centers is their energy bills increase. Whitney Webb in this interview was saying a single family home, people are paying $700 for electric bill a month.
Yeah.
And we have seen that with the Project Blue here, where coincidentally, the Project Blue people go to the Arizona Corporation Commission and request a rate hike with TEP all of a sudden, out of the blue, on the day that the Pima County Board votes on selling the land. It's not a coincidence.
Although they argue vehemently that it is.
Yeah, right. And I can sell you a one-footed rabbit if it's not a coincidence. I think it's important for our listeners to understand and be able to see the warning signs for stuff like this. And data centers is just a part of it. Even in Marana, a town outside of Tucson, there's a fight right now. The town of Marana City Council voted to rezone a 600-acre property to put a data center in. And it's, I think, Beal Construction or Infrastructure is part of that. But now another company connected to them that are trying to sue the town because the people tried to get enough signatures for a petition to put this on the ballot because they wanted a choice. A lot of the residents did not want this data center. And ends up that the petitions failed for, coincidentally, again, some weird things. But a company affiliated with Beal is suing the town for not accepting the withdrawal of the petition from the people who were trying. It's just crazy. And I know there was no Desert Data Centers had a lawsuit against Pima County for meeting violation for the one where they agreed to sell the property to Project Blue. I'm not sure what the status of that is. So we've got a lot of data center fights here. The detention center that ICE just bought in Marana, they're expanding that to hold hundreds of more people.
Yeah, they are.
There's just a lot happening in the Tucson area, Pima County right now.
Well, and we're a microcosm of what's going on across the country, because both of these, the data centers and the detention centers, are being built out aggressively across the entire nation right now. And it's interesting because the data centers are going to be, they're an integral part of the technocratic control grid. It cannot exist without the data centers because they're required for the raw processing power to manage all of the data that is going to be collected on people everywhere. And then these detention centers, it's interesting because what we're seeing is that deportations, despite the Trump administration's promises on the campaign trail and then beginning last year, the numbers are way down. They are not deporting nearly as many people as they said they would, but they're arresting a lot of people. So arrests are up. So what that's doing is it's creating a glut in the system where we've got all of these people, many of whom are being wrongfully held, and they're providing a justification to build out more and more detention centers, which we have argued, and I'm going to say it again right now, we think that illegal immigration is only a temporary excuse for them until they actually get them built out. Once they are built out, they can be used for whatever reasons the government, especially the federal government, wants.
Peter, I don't want you to be right.
I know, no one ever does. But they can be used to hold undesirables. And undesirables are going to be anyone
Yours truly.
who is a thorn in the side of the government.
Shit, my list.
Yeah.
And so are you, Peter.
The thing is, it's clear to us that we will be. I think there are a lot of people who will be surprised that they're on the list, who don't imagine that there would be a reason that they would be, including a lot of conservatives who are supporting the government and the current administration right now. And they don't understand why eventually they might be considered a threat to the state, and why it might be that the state would want to actually round them up as well.
That brings to mind that something that we've been talking about for a while, that the left and the right changed the narratives to suit where they're going, obviously with one objective. But that this time around, because the Republicans are in power, that the narrative focuses on the way to get the Republican base accepting of the changes. And so they're not going to understand.
Right.
Like they're both sides, a lot of people on both sides fall under this right-left paradigm. And
Majority of people. fall in that
unfortunately,
Paradigm.
yeah.
Well, and that's because the majority of our media is couched in that paradigm. And so we are conditioned to think in those terms, whether we really choose to or whether we would have done so naturally or not,
Yeah.
because it's provided to us constantly as the way the world works.
Yes, but as soon as you are not useful, which right now the Republicans are useful to push through the real ID and the immigration stuff and all the right-leaning narrative stuff, as soon as they're not useful anymore, what happens? We've seen this throughout history.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting to me is that they're actually burning through their support a lot more quickly than I've seen happen in previous administrations, where there were clearly some goals that were laid out for the Trump administration to achieve when it came in, both geopolitically, and that is more under the Zionist influence, and technocratically, which is under the Silicon Valley influence. And
Yeah.
especially in the case of the former, they seem to be really pushing hard in ways that are risky in terms of losing that support base. And we're seeing it happen right now. And so there's a bit of a race to see if they can achieve these objectives before they completely crucify that goodwill
Yeah.
from their supporters. And I've never seen it happen this aggressively before. I've seen people do it back during the Obama terms. Obama did this in his second term. He started to move further and further away from his support base in terms of trying to achieve certain objectives. But he really sort of managed the flow of that so that they wouldn't alienate their own base until the very end. And we're only in the beginning of the second year of the Trump administration, and they're already at that point, and we're not even halfway through the administration yet. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how they play this.
Well, Trump's working that warp speed thing pretty good.
Yeah.
But that's a good point to make, is that, yes, we are harping on the Trump administration, but it's not because they're Republicans. We would be harping on the administration if they were Democrats, because they would be doing the same thing, just with a little tweak of the narrative. So this isn't about crucifying Republicans and Democrats. This is about educating people on being able to see outside the left-right narratives and seeing what's really going on instead of watching the dangling carrot
Yeah. So let's get back to what's going on with the technocratic build out within the administration, because there have been a few things that have happened really recently.
Oh, yes, in the last couple of weeks. And this is what I was telling the listeners to be watchful for, just like this warp speed thing. The technocrats are taking over the government on the federal level. And we've talked about that through this whole season with many people in the administration. And even if they weren't the heads of the administration, like Pete Hegseth, he's just a talking head. You got to look below him. And
Who's the deputy?
deputy,
Yep.
yeah. And so here is another example, and this is a recent example. I think it was just about a week ago, where Trump announced that he has appointed people to the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. And this is a technocratic playbook. The council is going to be co-chaired by David Sachs and Michael Kratsios. We've talked about them extensively. They're both major technocrats and holders of wealth. I love the way Michelle Stiles, our friend, who calls them the holders of wealth, because that gives them less of a pedestal to stand on instead of elite. The following individuals have been appointed to the council. I just talked about the co-chair, Mark Andreessen, and he is a technocrat.
Yeah, he's the CEO of Andreessen Horowitz, which is a company that has been involved in several large ventures involving building out technocracy, one of which is building out these technocratic states like we've seen in Central America, where they are trying to build this state called Prunomos.
Okay. Smart city
Yeah,
venture.
Costa Rica, and they're using lawfare to try to get this done. They've had a couple of other projects in California, and the idea is to basically create these tech utopias that have their own governance structures that are parasitic on a larger state of one kind or another, but that ultimately supersede it in terms of governability.
Oh, you mean they're owned by a sovereign corporation with the CEO?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Mark Andreessen's been a large driver of this concept.
Okay, so the next person that he appointed is Sergey Brin.
Mm-hmm. Who's a co-founder of Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google and other companies.
So big tech.
Yes.
Frah Kotz, I think is her name. She's an Israeli-American business executive. She is the executive vice chair and former CEO of the Oracle Corporation.
Oh, that's interesting, which gives her a connection to Larry Ellison.
Absolutely. Michael Dell, which I haven't looked into, but I'm assuming by the last name, it might be the Dell Corporation.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Jacob DeWitt, he is the co-founder and CEO of Okla Inc., an advanced nuclear technology company, which is not surprising because that's how Trump is planning to power the data centers, because we don't have enough electricity for the data centers and us peons. Fred Ehrsam, he's the co-founder of cryptocurrency exchange Coinbase, the co-founder and general partner of the crypto-focused venture capital firm Paradigm, and the co-founder and CEO of Nudge, a neurotechnology startup. So total technocrat.
Okay, for sure.
That sounds social engineering to me. Nudge.
Well, that ties into things like Elon Musk's Neuralink. Also,
yeah, absolutely. Right? Larry Ellison, who's the co-founder and CEO of Oracle. David Friedberg, he's the founder of the Climate Corporation and served as its chief executive officer. He also facilitated the sale of Monsanto. Jensen Huang, NVIDIA. So data, technocrat.
Yeah. Jensen Huang has been very important to the Trump administration so far in the last year because NVIDIA provides a large number of chips and other sorts of technology to the federal government and to the military in particular.
John Martinez, he's a physicist and professor. He led a team to develop a superconducting quantum computer at the Quantum AI Lab.
Okay.
Technocrat.
Yes.
And Mark Zuckerberg is the last one, which most people know his name.
Sure. Meta. He's interestingly been getting a lot of publicity I've seen on Facebook. They seem to be really trying to rehabilitate his brand and his image. They're trying to make him look like a big humanitarian. Lots of coverage of him and his wife and their daughters participating in various sort of feel-good activities.
Oh, so it's in the Epstein files then.
Yes.
They're trying to brand him as a family man. So not only that, this was a week ago that Trump is appointing all of these huge technocrats to help run the country. Obviously, he's data center oriented, everything we've been talking about this last year.
Right.
But Trump is making this possible.
Well, so yeah, and this relates to other projects that we've discussed previously, like the Stargate project,
Yeah.
the Genesis mission, where they are basically de-siloing everything in the federal government that retains data on us as citizens, research projects, all sorts of things, and combining them into repositories that are being curated by private companies in Silicon Valley.